we are going to be talking about boundaries. Saying no and sticking to it.
Period.
Okay.
I value my time, but I've also agreed to XYZ.
Yes.
What compromises can I come to where I'm still valuing my time, but I'm also respecting this relationship?
Why would I try to assert my boundaries again if it's going to lead to this much commotion?
If your intention is to retain the integrity of the relationship, then you will find a way to erect that boundary without, lambasting, being mean to that person.
I've struggled with being a chronic people pleaser my whole life. Growing up, I was taught to, quote unquote, suffer in silence.
Hello and welcome to the To My Sisters podcast. I'm Renee.
And I'm Courtney, and we are your online sisters and hosts of the To My Sisters podcast.
Now, we are all about promoting the wellness, growth and development of a community of sisters across the world.
And today we are going to be talking about boundaries. Saying no and sticking to it.
Period.
Okay. Literally, I think a lot of us on our journeys may have discovered at some point that we struggle with saying no. It could be that we're a people pleaser.
Yeah.
It could be that we just don't want to take up too much space.
Yeah.
It could be that we feel selfish and guilty about saying no.
Yeah.
We're going to explore women's relationships with the word no.
Oh, you in your Oprah bag today, the way you said that.
No. Yeah, no. We have to be able to say it with confidence. It's a full sentence. No full stop.
Correct.
So, why do you think so many women feel guilty about saying no to things?
Yeah. I think it's a myriad of different reasons. The first thing that comes to mind for me is the way that we've been socialized. As women, we are often socialized as caregivers. We are socialized as people that are, givers in so many different capacities. We are socialized as, very much service oriented. And I think even in terms of our career choices as well, when we think of service oriented businesses or when we think of support systems, we often think of women. And when you are socialized in these particular categories or these particular ways, people can find it easy to then think that they have unfettered access to you, right? Like when you think of, for example, the hospital, you go to the hospital when you're sick, you ain't thinking about the hospital's boundaries. You're like, I'm sick. I need something. I need you to supply me and support me with my needs. When you think about a mother, daughter-son relationship, the daughter and son is not thinking about the mother's boundaries. Babe, hit me up. I need you. Like, I need the breast milk or like, I need the food. Like, I'm crying. I need something. When you think about even popular associations around like wifehood and stuff like that, it's probably not as distinctive as motherhood may be. But in terms of, the wife's role being a caretaker, a caregiver, fulfilling the needs of the husband, with so many of us playing these roles of caregivers, especially as caregivers where oftentimes we have to give people access to us, it can feel very, very weird and difficult to then take up a position where you're putting up a boundary against a person, whether it be in the actual situation. So mothers, wives, caregivers, it can feel very, very difficult to erect a boundary, especially when it feels like you're denying somebody else their needs. But it often comes as a consequence of you denying your needs. And that's the bit that we often don't recognize and why we feel guilty, because we haven't recognized that we have needs too. And those needs need to be supplanted. So as much as we are running around feeling guilty about other people's needs, oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this even, we don't actually recognize what our needs are. Like, who is there to supply our needs? We don't even give ourselves space to recognize exactly what our needs are. And so it's very, very easy to see how a lot of women feel really guilty about saying no, about having boundaries, about prioritizing themselves, because we have literally created these caricatures of ourselves as givers. Give.
Big
no
facts.
take.
No take.
The issue is the equation is imbalanced. The more you give, which is great. No one is saying that you shouldn't be service oriented. No one is saying that you shouldn't give. But the more you give without taking into account that there's a cost, there's an energy deficit there, you will find yourself burnt out. You will find yourself resentful. You will find yourself tired. And you will find yourself empty. Big time empty.
So true.
And so for a lot of us as women, that's often the reason, well, at least one of the reasons why we can find it so difficult to erect boundaries.
Yeah.
We have gotten used to being givers without receiving anything to fill our cup.
Yeah.
Our cup is empty and we're pouring from nothing. We are to the point where there's one really lovely quote that goes something along the lines of, why are you setting yourself on fire to keep somebody warm? And many of us started the journey with looking for firewood to keep people warm. But then when that firewood ran out, we started using our own body parts to keep other people warm. And that is the challenge. A lot of us have gotten to a place where we're literally setting ourselves on fire. We are compromising on our own needs. We are compromising on our own livelihoods to ensure that there is warmth provided to something or someone else. And so for women, when it comes to erecting boundaries, first of all, you actually need to recognize there's a need. There's a need that actually requires a ring fencing to be able to erect a boundary. And if you don't have that, well, of course, the walls are going to fall down because it's not built on a sturdy foundation of a need. The need is the foundation. What is it that you're trying to prioritize by building a boundary in the first place? Is it your mental health? Is it your well-being? Is it your happiness? Is it your joy? Is it your energy? And actually seeing these things as worthy of protecting. And so a lot of us, we don't see our needs. We don't see ourselves as worthy of protecting. And that heavily translates to the guilt that we feel when it comes to erecting those boundaries. But what do you think, friend, in terms of the challenges?
That's really good. I think you've really started it off on a good note there and giving like a lot of things that we can all relate to, actually. And I do think in the way we are socialized as women, we are told like, girl, put your needs last.
You don't matter.
Exactly, you don't matter. And I think even exploring this around myself, like in therapy, a lot of it was even when you were at the age of needing to depend on people, sometimes that it wasn't afforded to you, you know, it didn't happen, you know, not because my parents were evil, my parents were cool, but like, you know, life circumstances, you know, growing up and being broke, or, you know, ending up being raised by a single parent. Sometimes your needs aren't met, and so you get to a place where you don't make demands anymore. And I think we carry that into adulthood where we don't actually make demands, we don't ask for things, we don't, you know, allow people to, like you said, recognize that we actually have needs, we actually have desires, there are actually certain things that will protect us and that deserves to actually be respected. So I think it's one, seeing yourself as, like you said, someone who has needs and allowing yourself to have needs as well. I think the other reason why sometimes we feel guilt around boundaries is when you've tried to assert boundaries before and they've been violated, and it's like, damn, why would I try to assert my boundaries again if it's going to lead to this much commotion or this much, like, you know, labeling or backlash or them being violated? Why would I open myself up to that kind of disappointment over and over and over again? And I think what I've seen from different women is when our boundaries are continuously disrespected, we struggle to exert consequences because that makes us feel guilty. Like, okay, you violated my boundaries, that makes me feel so bad, but now I also feel guilty about cutting you off as a friend or ending this relationship or
that's really good.
Putting some distance between us. I think there's also a lot of guilt that surrounds consequences. And I think sometimes it does show that, like, girl, you're not even honoring the boundaries that you set by making sure that there is to some degree a consequence to violating them, but also believing that what has been done to you is actually a violation. Like, I think for a lot of us, something happens to us and we're like, oh, just, you know, water under the bridge, I'll forgive. But it's like, babe, this is actually crossing your boundaries, like, continuously. And it may feel like it's not a threat, but it does something to your sense of safety, it does something to your sense of self, it does something to your feeling of being protected. And so speak up against that, like, even if it's a small thing as well. I think sometimes the guilt is like, okay, this is a personal boundary to be, and I know that some people are okay with it. So for example, like, what's a good example that I can give? Like, sharing food. Like, some people may be like, I know that sharing food is common, but I don't want anyone to touch my food. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
And
I
it may be tied to something deep, or it might not.
Yeah.
It might just be a preference.
even
It
have
might
to
just
be
be an ick. It doesn't even have to be deep. It's just I don't like it. So stop trying to force it on me. Like, take your filthy hands from my plate.
No, because it's the hand.
Honestly,
it's a lot. I feel like you're speaking to me. It's like specifically.
But with that, it may be like easy to minimize it and be like, oh, but you know, it's just food. But it's like, babe, it makes you severely uncomfortable. Just say it. Like, it really irks me that you eat from my plate. And like, you and that person can, you know, get to a common ground of like, okay, it may irk you, but I'm going to continue doing it. And you may both decide that you're fine with that. Or you may have to assert that, like, no, it grieves me that you do this. It grieves me that you do this. I go to bed angry because you know did when you're sleeping. Do you get what I mean? And it's now playing on my mind. Stop doing that. Do you get what I mean? And so for some of us, we like discount our boundaries because we're like, it's not that deep.
Yeah.
But babe, if it's deep to you, it's actually deep. Talk it out. I don't know if you want to take it to therapy or talk about it with the person or what, but like, it's actually okay to be like, I don't like that when you do that. And like I recently told you, I don't like being surprised.
Yeah.
I was talking to my fiance and he was just like, you know, you like surprises that you know about. I said, you're damn right.
That's true.
I don't like to be surprised. Woo, shock. Why? My central nervous system. I could collapse and die. I can't take it. My heart can't take it. I feel unsafe right now. Like, surprise, happy birthday, guys. Guys, I could die. Don't do that. I feel unsafe. I feel like I've been deceived. So many things are layered there. So no, it's a big deal for me. It's a big deal for me.
So when it comes to,
go on.
When it comes to like birthdays and like general milestones, when people want to surprise you,
Well, I think one, I latch onto a surprise very quickly. Yeah. So like, I can tell something's happening. I'm quite good at that. But like, if it were to happen, I'm like genuinely shocked. So like, for example, I think my 23rd birthday, my friend Jade surprised me with like, everyone was at dinner and we walked in and I was completely caught off guard. In those moments, that's not too problematic for me because obviously, woo, joyful. But I don't like scary, like boo, or like scary, like, or like surprises for things that I see. Well, I was gonna say for things that I see coming, but it's also things I don't see coming. So it's all of it. Don't shock me.
Goodness,
don't surprise me. Don't run up on me.
No, do you know what's funny? Do you know what's funny, guys? I used to do that to Courtney.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm telling you, Renee, I wanted to hit you. Like it just like Renee will just be behind me and be like, "Boo." If I slapped you now, do you get what I mean? Just as a reflex, now it's a problem.
No, you're actually so funny. Because the thing is, I thought that I was doing something.
Yeah. No, I know. But this is what I mean by the point. It's like you weren't doing anything deeply problematic. Do you get what I mean? And it's literally just a personal thing. Like it wasn't like she's such an evil person. She keeps surprising me. But it's like, I don't know why this is weird for me, but I actually I deeply dislike this experience. I deeply dislike this experience. Like, I feel so violated. I was so safe in my little cocoon.
It's your face.
I was in my thoughts. And now suddenly,
it's
disruption. But stuff like that, I think it's, as I've gotten older, I've learned, like, don't just sweep stuff like that under the rug. Like, because it can actually just turn into like a deep annoyance. And it's like, girl, just say, like, I don't like that. Do you get what I mean? And like, it's actually okay. Like I'm saying, I recently told you I don't like that. And it was like, this seems so dumb to express, but it is a boundary. I don't know why. It is important. Like, and then the last thing that I will say, and I think it leads really well onto the next point, is that you don't want to be labeled as being difficult. Yeah. And I think this is what happens when women put boundaries at work, in their family, in their, marriage, in their relationship. It's just seen as you're being too difficult. Like, why can't you just appease everybody? If you say like, that's the time for that meeting doesn't work for me. All of a sudden, and suddenly it's, oh my God, but it works for everybody else. Okay, so you guys meet without me then, but we need you. Then you have to work around the situation. I'm sorry. I can't move something, or maybe like it's past my bedtime. Like, I'm sorry. Do you get what I mean? Or, and it doesn't mean that you can't bend. And so I think that leads to the next question, which is, what is the difference between being difficult and just being somebody who has boundaries?
Yeah, somebody that has boundaries. Great question. And I think most of us are trying to be people that have boundaries rather than being difficult. I think especially for women, we are just trying to have some boundaries. I think for those that are trying to erect boundaries, it really is tied to the intention behind the boundary or the intention behind the behavior.
Yeah.
So for a lot of us, we're not trying to intentionally be difficult. We're not intentionally trying to cause disruption, right? It really is about prioritizing and protecting our mental health and well-being, prioritizing ourselves, and not in a selfish way in that we are completely eschewing everybody around us, but it's more so a recognition that you two are valuable, and there are certain things in your life, there are certain things that are in line with your values that are valuable and need to be protected. A great example is one that you shared, but really around time. Right? Like, if you are someone that intrinsically believes that your time is valuable, then you should also have, logically, boundaries around your time. It may be that you are an early bird, which means that, okay, cool. For me, for example, between the hours of, I want to say 5 to 9 a.m., I'm not going to respond to any text messages. Don't call me unless it's an emergency. That's my me time because I prioritize that time. The intention there is not to be difficult. The intention there is not to cause discord or sow discord. The intention there is to actually protect my mental health and well-being so that I can show up in the different areas or the different spaces that require me to show up well. And it actually provides fuel to relationships anyways. And I think that's another important distinction. What are your boundaries actually producing and doing? Is it producing, again, disruption? Is it producing resentment, all that kind of stuff? Or is it, and when I say resentment and all of these negative emotions, I mean more so for yourself than, you know, other people. Because sometimes when we erect boundaries, as you were mentioning, we might not be met with the correct response. We might be met with a, you're doing too much, you're being difficult or disruptive, but you're actually not being difficult, you're just being respectful of your own time and your own values. And I think it starts there. So what is it that you're trying to produce by protecting your time? Are you actively trying to produce time where you can protect yourself, where you can focus on yourself, where you can, you know, be better to yourself, for yourself, as well as being able to show up for other people as well? Or is it that you're literally intentionally trying to be disruptive, annoying, you genuinely don't like people, so you're trying to be a bit difficult? Chances are you fall into the former rather than the latter. And I think many of us actually need to go on that journey of practicing erecting some of those boundaries and enforcing, as you were saying, some of those consequences. Again, work is a perfect analogy or perfect place that you can do that. I think because many of us are in these spaces and there are parts of us that don't inherently feel that we are valuable in those spaces, and that translates to the way that we interact with people. I will never forget, in the very early years of like working, my line manager said to me, shout out to him, I actually love him. My line manager said to me, we had a one-to-one, and he was like, Renee, like, the work that you do is great, lovely person, all of that kind of good stuff, but I don't really feel like you're bringing your full self to work. And I was like, oh, what does that mean in terms of like personality, etc? And he was like, no, like, I know that you do like other things, I know that there's other things that you really enjoy prioritizing, but I haven't really seen you push back or challenge. And I was like, what do you mean push back or challenge? Look, I'm not trying to have any like repercussions. And he was like, there it is. You're afraid of the repercussions of basically erecting boundaries, or you are afraid of the consequences of you deciding, this is valuable to me, or me, you know, ring fencing this time for myself. And he actually encouraged me. He was like, look, I appreciate that you are an excellent worker, but I also appreciate that you actually need to spend some time like in the mornings or in the evenings, or if there's some times where, like, for example, meetings don't work for you, that's actually perfectly okay. And we actually followed up doing an exercise. Granted, I know that this is not the reality for everyone, but we did an exercise whereby we did a like Visa card or like postcard of me, how to interact with me. Do you prefer feedback that is written down or face to face? Do you prefer having meetings in the morning or the afternoon? When is the best time to approach you about a particular situation? And it wasn't necessarily to promote difficulty, but actually to promote ease. And I think sometimes we think that just because there's initial resistance to us in our boundaries, we don't realize that sometimes it actually lends itself to long-term ease. So yes, there's the initial difficulty of expressing and articulating, these are my boundaries, but it actually makes it easier to relate to other people, because then they get to understand you and the way that you work, and it makes things so much easier. The same way with some of my coworkers, I know do not contact them before 12 p.m. Just don't do it. You will get nothing from them. Or, you know, they're not working on a Wednesday. If they've got childcare, don't message them then. Or they really love having meetings on Tuesday mornings because that's the time that they're fresh and ready. If I'm also willing to respect their boundaries, then I have to trust that when I erect my boundaries, they will have to respect it. Have to. And there will be consequences if it happens. And it's not going to always be a perfect implementation. There will be some people that, you know, transgress your boundaries, sometimes unintentionally and not in a mean way, but it's down to you actually doing the work of, hey, you've transgressed my boundary. I'm going to give you 3 strikes. The first strike, you didn't know. The second strike, you're trying to be annoying. The third strike, you're actually liable for consequences now. Kind of like the driving system, points for your license and all of that kind of good stuff.
Sisters, we know we are having a good, juicy conversation all about boundaries, but girls, sometimes enforcing your boundaries is hard. And so here we are here I am to help you. Hopefully it will be sufficient. So we have a ding, ding, ding dilemma. Okay. Hello, sisters. I'm really grateful for your show. Not show, child. Yeah, I'll take it. And I'd love some guidance on my situation. I'm a woman in my early 20s and I've struggled with being a chronic people pleaser my whole life. Growing up, I was taught to, quote unquote, suffer in silence. And as a result, I now have a hard time expressing my feelings, trusting myself, and building confidence. I often seek validation from others and don't feel sure of myself. Until recently, I had very little self-awareness, and now that I see these patterns, I'm finding it difficult to change. I've tried therapy to work on myself, but I'm not seeing much progress. I've also attempted to set boundaries, but haven't been successful in that either. Sometimes it feels like the people closest to me, friends and family, don't take me seriously or aren't concerned about hurting my feelings. I'll be turning 25 soon and starting a new career. Congratulations. And the last thing I want is to repeat these patterns in the workplace. What are your thoughts on this? And what advice would you give a sister? First of all, thank you so much for sending in this dilemma. And girl, you are not alone. I think a lot of us can resonate with the fact that our upbringing and the environment we grew up in has kind of shaped us into people pleasers, you know? And that can be a really, really hard trait to let go of. And honestly, in your 20s, your early 20s in particular, when you're emerging into your adulthood, is when these things tend to actually start manifesting. And so what I would say is, I know you said that you tried therapy. I know you said that you also tried to enforce some boundaries and it's actually not proven to be successful, but give it another go. Right? Whether it be going back to therapy or continuing to set yourself small or big boundaries, which you try to enforce. A lot of these things, I would say, are practice, right? You didn't just become a people pleaser overnight, right? It was maybe years of experiences, someone saying yes here or no there, or you don't matter in different ways over time that taught you that your needs actually don't matter. And unlearning that is also not going to happen overnight. It may take years of practice, but now that you're stepping into a new workplace, now that hopefully you still have, you know, relationships with your family and you get to keep interacting with them, start enforcing micro boundaries, just small things here and there. Experiment with saying no if somebody asks you for something, you know, or just asking. I would say not even about saying no, but asking for your needs to be accommodated for. Like a huge thing that I think we struggle with is asking people to compromise in a way that meets us where we're at, or at least brings them halfway as we move halfway. People pleasers are very used to going to the other end of the spectrum to please the other person. And they struggle with asking that person to come just halfway to meet them in the middle. And so it's okay to ask people to just meet you in the middle and to ask people to be just a little bit, I wouldn't even say inconvenienced, but impacted by your needs. And that's actually all right. I think you'd be shocked to find how many people will actually accommodate your micro boundaries. Like, okay, I want to have a meeting at 3. Instead of you jumping to be like, yes, and I'll move my whole, you know, life around so we can have that meeting at 3. Just tell them actually 4 would work better for me. Is that okay? And they'll probably come back to you and be like, yes. Or if they say no, be like, well, then we're going to have to find a whole different day, or maybe try the morning. We don't know. But it's okay to have these conversations. And I'm guaranteeing you that the maybe fear that you have that people would think, oh, she's being difficult, or why can't she just, accommodate me, won't actually end up manifesting, because most people aren't crazy. I know sometimes we think like people are going to react in the most dramatic ways. Maybe if you have an African mum, that's what's, caused you to be fearful. But actually, most people are very normal and very used to accommodating for people's needs as well and working around them. So hopefully you are surrounded by sane people who are empathetic and emotionally intelligent enough to understand that you are also worth working around. And so my ultimate advice to this one, sis, is try again. Keep trying. Keep betting on yourself to actually overcome this people-pleasing tendency. And before you know it, it may take you 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 15, 20. We don't know. But at some point on your glowing and growing journey, you'll look back and be like, whoa, me 10, 20, 15 years ago could never have said no to that. But now I'm able to say no really boldly. And it doesn't matter how long it takes you to get to that point. Just don't give up on getting to that point. So yeah, that would be my encouragement to you. Let's get back to the episode, girl.
But yeah, I do think that it is very important for us to understand, okay, cool. What is it that I'm trying to produce with these boundaries? And how is it that what I value is being reflected in what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And I think that's the last thing that I'll say around the difference between being difficult and protecting your peace, essentially. Is what I'm actually doing, is the boundary appropriate for the value that I have internally? Because sometimes we can say, oh yeah, I'm protecting my peace, I'm trying to like value my time and all of that kind of good stuff, but the boundary that you've actually erected is not conducive to that whatsoever. So for example, to flip the switch a little bit, I was watching a TikTok recently that was talking about the violation of social codes and how a lot of people don't go to like baby showers anymore or weddings or whatever. They just like, I'm protecting my peace. I'm going through something right now. They RSVP'd, yes, and they decided on the day, I'm not coming. And they're sending a message to the mother-to-be or the friend on the day of as they are approaching, saying, babe, I can't make it. And the excuse is, I'm protecting my peace. I'm erecting a boundary. The value is correct insofar as, okay, cool, you value your time. But the implementation of the boundary is absolutely inappropriate, especially considering it's not necessarily a boundary at all, but rather a cop-out and an excuse. A cop-out and an excuse. And so understanding, okay, cool, I value my time, but I've also agreed to X, Y, Z. What compromises can I come to where I'm still valuing my time, but I'm also respecting this relationship? And so is this boundary, this is my value. Is this boundary actually appropriate? And coming to the conclusion, ideally sooner rather than later, especially in those kind of instances where it's very, very last minute. That also shows that, okay, if you were really prioritizing your time, would you have communicated? Exactly. Would you have communicated that you were available when you weren't? That's even a violation of your own boundary in the first instance. And now you end up being perceived as difficult and also creating the reputation of yourself as somebody that's inconsistent and doesn't show up. And so when that starts to be your reputation, when you start using boundaries as an excuse, when you start using boundaries as proxy for the fact that you're actually inconsistent and there's deep character flaws, that's when that moves from being a boundary to you actually being difficult.
Yeah, I completely agree.
But yeah, that's some of my thoughts, Quartz, but would love to hear what you
completely agree with that. I think what you illustrated on the second half of that was actually perfect, because I do think there is a space for us to take this boundaries thing too far. It's like, oh, I have boundaries, but you're actually just keeping everybody else out and yourself in. Like, these aren't boundaries. I think we used to talk about this very early in the podcast, but these are walls. Like, you're keeping yourself away from people and stopping yourself from building intimate relationships. And I have seen a lot of people do things which not only violate social code, but it's also fundamentally, the world doesn't work like that. Like, there are some times where it's like, oh no, I have a boundary around work, and it's like, but babe, you signed a contract that says you will work 40 hours a week. You have a duty. Like, you it's illegal for what you're doing is actually illegal. What you're doing is called violation of your contractual duties. Right. You will be fired. And like, if that is the case, that's a consequence for you as well. And so I think it's also realizing that, like, boundaries aren't just a cop out for, like you said, I'm not going to show up to do what I've agreed to do. However, it is tailoring how you do what you need to do to make sure that it fits your personal needs in that moment as well. And I love that example you illustrated about your workplace, because I do think it's about creating a space where people are also aware. I think sometimes we lash out at people. It's like, why are you doing this? Like, babe, I didn't know that you found that annoying. I didn't know you don't like meetings in the morning. Why are you shouting at me? Or like, I didn't realize that like you had childcare today. That's why I'm calling you. Tell me. Do you get what I mean? That's why if I had known. And I think for a lot of us, it's also the communication around it as well that will help the enforcement of our boundaries to actually be more effective. But I do think talking about all these like consequences, it would be good to actually illustrate for the girls what do consequences look like for violating your boundaries.
So it doesn't always have to be I'm cutting off my friend. They violated I'm cutting them off. So for example, I generally have my phone on do not disturb from 5 a.m. to about 12 p.m. There are very few people that can get through to me on that DND. You have to be a favorite on my favorites list to be able to call me. If I feel that you are calling me incessantly for things and matters that are not important, I will take you off my favorites list. We're still friends and we're still cool and I love you, but you can no longer access me between these times. You have violated my boundaries a bit one too many times, which means that we have a little bit of a difference in values. So I need to erect this boundary here, but our relationship is still intact.
It's a really good example.
And I think that's important. It's about outlining what is it that you want as a fruit of the consequence. It's not always going to be you completely cutting off the friend. It's not always you throwing away the relationship. It just means that there's new dynamics that you need to introduce in order for that person to really get it in their head. This boundary, I need to respect this one. Or by force, I'm going to have to respect this one. Do you know what I'm saying? Even with the sharing food example, I find that one so hilarious. If somebody is constantly like violating your boundary and you're like, I don't like sharing food, but they're constantly putting their hand in your food out of habit, we ain't going to eat no more.
Anymore.
We can go get some coffee. Let me see you put your hands and dip your hands inside my coffee cup.
Go ahead. Do it. Try it.
Go ahead. No. Because the sharing food one, you don't look crazy. But you dipping your two fingers. You dipping your two fingers inside my tea. Everybody else is going to say that you're crazy. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes it looks like you removing environmental factors or really enforcing your boundaries by changing things up is actually okay. That is my coffee date friend. We no longer go out to eat because you have an incessant need to eat my food and that does not work for me. That's calm. So there's so many activities that you can do. You can go paintballing, you can go laser tag. Afterwards we won't eat. Or better yet, you can get takeaway. Oh babe, I'm just gonna take my food
to go.
I'm gonna take my food to go, but that's all you. You know what I'm saying? Or even, there's other things that you can do, different extremities. Right, you can eat before you go. You can decide to eat after.
That's true.
And there's different ways of enforcing those different boundaries. When it comes to, for example, meetings at work, you put a block. You cannot listen. That Google Calendar, even Teams, there are certain functionalities whereby if somebody automatic decline.
Literally,
I started using that. Excellent. Even sends people a message saying, "Hey, hey, I'm not around." There was one hilarious example. So future brother-in-law Kenny, he had a DND or like an out of office. He was on holiday, so you cannot book a meeting with this guy. And the message said, hey, I'm on holiday, spending some time away, much needed time with my family. Perhaps you should consider doing the same. And so I was like, do you know what? If you can impart in enforcing do you know what I'm saying? If you can enforce but also impart, it's not a bad thing. And it actually had me thinking, I said, maybe me too. I need to take a holiday soon because if you're taking a holiday, goodness, maybe it's my time too. So I think seeing that there are different ways that you can enforce your boundaries without affecting the integrity of your relationship. And I think also even having the intention around that too. It's like, oh no, sis, I really love you, but this thing you're doing is a bit too much. Tough. And I think sometimes you also need to give people grace. So for example, even with the whole surprise thing that you don't like, there may be like 1 or 2 times in the interim whilst we're transitioning over to respecting your boundaries that I might still be like, running up in the and then you realize, oh, she don't like that. And so
Hilarious.
Giving people transition time when you erect a boundary as well.
Yeah.
So it means that you lower your expectations a little bit. Because I think sometimes we're like, oh, I've told this person this thing. The next day they're going to change.
Yeah.
But if it's become habitual, then it requires intentionality to break out of that. But people sometimes require grace.
Definitely.
Even you yourself, you need grace. You'll even forget your own boundary.
Yeah.
And then somebody will have to remind you and say, babe, didn't you say you didn't like this?
Yeah, exactly. Or didn't you say you were going to do this instead?
So why are you doing this?
Yeah.
So I think if your intention is to retain the integrity of the relationship, then you will find a way to erect that boundary without, lambasting, being mean to that person. Just giving people a bit more grace and seeing that everybody is coming from a different viewpoint, different standpoint, different lifestyle. And sometimes there are very difficult things that people do that can't be changed.
Yeah.
And if they can't change that, well, hey, there's things that you can change.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Good.
And I think also discerning what's the intention behind somebody breaking the boundary in the first place. Because we are very quick to assume, oh, this person's breaking my boundary because they hate me. They don't want to be my friend. They don't respect me. And sometimes it's actually not that. Sometimes, there's cultural differences. Yeah. Sometimes there's literally things are habitual. They're literally especially if it's a new boundary. Yeah. If someone has known you for 20 years, I can tell my mom tomorrow, Mom, I have a boundary. Don't call me before
at this time.
That lady will still call me.
Absolutely.
She will say, and the message, she'll even send me message after message after message with emoji signed off. You know what I'm saying? So
why aren't you picking up my call? I told you,
Mom, I'm not gonna be around at these times.
Say, oh, sorry. Anyway, now that I've got you,
continue. But it's like that's not malicious and like they're not intentionally trying to disrespect you. It's more so, old habits die hard. Old habits exactly die hard. And so if you can't change, it's not that you won't, if you can't change right now, then I'm going to change, or I'm going to make sure that I'm enforcing my boundaries so that I'm still respected and I still have the time and space to value my boundaries.
That's so good. And putting mechanisms in place, I really, really like that. And I think one thing I have definitely learned from Kenny over the time of knowing him is very much like he is very, very good at putting mechanisms in place to make sure I don't even need to put my boundaries on you.
Bruh.
I will put things in place to make sure that you don't violate my boundaries. Like if Kenny calls you, he's calling you on do not disturb. He's like, he's calling you on do not disturb. He's calling you on no caller ID. He's like, you don't need my number.
You don't need to know.
I'm calling you.
Yeah.
You don't need my number.
You know how funny that is? He'll be like, oh, who is this?
Keeps calling me?
Kenny. He's like, yeah, hello.
Yeah, and he's like, you're right. Who is this?
You should have known that it was me, sir.
How? But now I do, because you're the only one who does this thing. You're the only one who does this thing. Literally. But I think that's a good example of like, I won't wait for you to respect my boundary. I will put something in place to make sure that you must respect it. Because the amount of people who like give your number without asking you, that's the perfect example of I won't let you get me. I won't let you get me. Absolutely not.
No, that's crazy.
I think also on the more difficult side of that as well, because I love that you gave examples of like the day-to-day ways we can enforce our boundaries, but I also think there are some really defining moments in our life sometimes where it can be hard to enact or enforce a consequence, right? For example, in a romantic relationship, if a boundary that you have set in your romantic relationship is repeatedly crossed, a consequence looks like ending that relationship. And that can be a really, really hard consequence to enforce, Not abstinence.
No, because how many dilemmas? I wanted to be abstinent with him, but he didn't really respect the boundary. Babe, cut that off.
But also you didn't respect the boundary either. Like, I think that's a broader conversation around like, girl, do you even respect why you're doing this at all? Like, let alone him. And also aligning yourself with people who enforce the same boundaries. I think abstinence is an interesting one, because abstinence is a personal boundary. Exactly. Like, I'm not doing this. It's funny how the Bible talks about like sexual immorality being the only sin against your body, right? Because it's your responsibility to keep this personal boundary, but you need to be with somebody who's also keeping that as a personal boundary. So if you're not, baby girl, this boundary is not a value. Like, let's be honest, it's just for cute, it's just for show.
Suggestion.
And you should really inquire of the Lord on that matter. But what I was gonna say is more so like cheating or shouting or like, I don't like it when you shout at me. I don't like it when you're late constantly and that behavior isn't changing. A consequence looks like, oh, beloved, we can't walk together anymore. We do not agree. Me and you are not on the same page. And like, I've told you that this thing isn't just a preference, it's actually a boundary.
Yeah.
Or like the way you talk about my family, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Right. And then like discussing that, like, okay, why? Because also sometimes you have to be ready for there to be a bit of pushback because, okay, you have this boundary, but this boundary actually doesn't make sense. Or you may need to adapt the boundary in this context, right? Like, okay, you don't like that I talk about your family, but your family keeps chopping our money. So I have to talk about it.
Oh.
Is it a lie?
Oh,
so Lord. Let's assess whether this is a boundary we can actually maintain. You do
not have to worry about me.
But I think it's also what you said. It's like, what is the purpose of this boundary? What is the why behind it? Like, okay, we have the boundary around our families because maybe you want your partner or your spouse to respect your family. Completely fine.
Makes sense.
But also you can respect your family whilst calling out something they're doing that is threatening your marriage or threatening your relationship or threatening you. Do you get what I mean? And so your partner should feel the freedom to be like, okay, above respecting your family as a value, there is a value on top of that, which is prioritizing your safety and then prioritizing the sanctity and the peace of our union. And so with things like that, I think be ready for a bit of pushback. Be ready for a little bit of pushback. And sometimes you can push back, you know, it's a little tug and push, but be open to that, I would say. And also don't be afraid of your life looking different after the consequences enforced, you know, because I think the breakup one in particular, or maybe distancing yourself from your family, sometimes those things come with repercussions. You know, you enforce a consequence and now you're cut off, or you know, you ain't got an inheritance no more, or you know, no, think about people who have had to put such a serious boundary between them and their family, and it's like, as much as my family was toxic and stuff, like I know my grandparents or my daddy left me an inheritance, or my mom, you know, and now I don't have access to that because I wouldn't let them abuse me. And now you've got to be okay with the consequence of that. So I think like you got to be a big girl. Like I think with the enforcement of boundaries and the enforcement of their consequences, you have to put on your big girl pants and make big girl decisions, which says like, okay, I know you violated my boundaries in this romantic relationship. I may be single for a couple years after this, but I would rather that than be in a situation that constantly violates my peace. I know that like my family, you are a dearly beloved part of my life, and maybe you are the source of my income right now, but the way y'all keep talking to me and acting towards me, I need to say goodbye and get myself a good big girl job, okay, or even a small girl job, just small. Anything, give me some cash so that I can cut myself off from this thing that keeps me attached to this place that refuses to let me have peace and safety. Right. And that's sometimes a big thing, and that's okay. And I can recognize, and we can recognize, that those things can be very hard and very, very difficult, but your peace, your safety are worth it. Like they are actually very valuable things. And so that's what I would say with consequences. Sometimes they can also look really big, really, really big as well. Well,
that's beautiful, man.
We're drawing to the end of this conversation.
Oh no, so
and
soon.
I want you to leave a little tidbit for the girls around boundaries, especially as they are finding their voices, they are advocating for themselves, and they are building the futures that they want. Leave your To My Sisters for the girls.
Oh, dropping it like it's hot. The hottest mixtape in town. To my sisters, valuable things need to be protected. Boundaries are one of the greatest ways that you can protect yourself, because you are inherently valuable. Your time, your well-being, your happiness, your joy, your safety, these are things that are valuable. These are things that are worthy of being protected. So don't be afraid to protect these valuable things, and don't be afraid to protect yourself.
That's so good. So good.
Hey sisters, we hope that you enjoyed that episode on everything boundaries and saying no. As mentioned, no is a full sentence, nothing else added. But before we leave you, as per, we wanted to give you something practical to run away with, to help you with really erecting some of those boundaries, but also reviewing some of those relationships and the way that you be interacting in these spaces where you are not showing up for yourself. And so this week's reflective question for you to go and journal, think about, write about is the following. Where in your life right now are you saying yes only out of fear or obligation? Identify at least one place. Ideally, if you do know that you have more places, then girl, make a list. We got work to do, and that is okay. But where right now in your life are you making those compromises out of fear or obligation, and not actually truly out of you establishing your core values or you establishing your boundaries? So make a list, write at least one this week. And in terms of those activities, this is where we get a bit more practical. So it's one thing to identify the areas where you're finding yourself saying yes to things, but it's another thing to start enacting your boundaries and start saying no. And this is the perfect week for you, sis, to start saying no. Full sentence, period, full stop. So this week, I challenge you. This is your activity. I want you to identify at least 3 places or 3 opportunities for you to say no and enforce a boundary. It doesn't have to be anything huge. We spoke about this in the podcast episode. It can be something that's quite small, whether it is saying no to the meeting that is happening a bit too late in the working day. It may be saying no to the calls that are coming through. It may be saying no to engaging in any work-based activities on a Saturday. It is up to you. But find those 3 opportunities for you to say no and enact those boundaries based on your values. It can also be something quite big. If you're feeling like you're up to the mammoth task of doing the deep work and actually enforcing boundaries in your relationships, girl, if it looks like you're breaking up with somebody this week, we are praying for you. But there is so much peace and joy to be found on the other side of you enforcing those boundaries. So that's your activity, that's your challenge. And if you would like sisterhood, friendship, community, accountability, especially as you enact some of those boundaries, then you should join our digital sisterhood, the Sisterhood community, where we gather on a weekly basis every single Wednesday to gist, to enjoy, to vibe, and to hold each other accountable to some of our goals throughout the week. So if that sounds like something that you could benefit from, I would definitely recommend that you join. The link will be in the description below, as well as in the description for Spotify. And we hope that you can join us soon-ish. Ideally, as soon as you've heard the sound of my voice, that would be great. That would be great. But sisters, if you would also like to stay up to date with all things To My Sisters, then make sure you join the newsletter over at www.tomysisters.com so you can stay up to date, but also receive those beautiful weekly love letters that we send to our community every single Monday, as well as any updates on any cool events that are coming up and coming around near you. Sisters, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let us know your thoughts on our social media platforms. There's Instagram, there's TikTok, there's X, whatever platform that you think is the most appropriate for you to share your voice, your thoughts. Let us know. Drop a comment, follow us, make sure that you are part of the conversation. How have you fared in enforcing your boundaries? What have been your previous experiences? Share the nuggets, share the knowledge, share the experiences with the sisterhood. And of course, you can follow us both individually. You can follow my lovely bestie at CB Boateng on pretty much everything. And you can follow me over at Renee Kapuku. All right, sisters. Well, we are praying for a wonderful boundary-filled week ahead. And we also pray that in enacting those boundaries, that you yourself can see the value of yourself, your time, your wellness, peace, joy, and all of the good things that are important to you. Wishing you a very, very restful week, a week where you say yes to yourself and no to the things that are preventing you from saying that yes to yourself in the first place. We will catch you very, very soon, probably sooner than you'd expect and sooner than you'll think. But until then, sisters, we love you. Keep glowing and growing.